You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the BioHealth Capital Region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Hi, this is Rich Bendis, your host for BioTalk. And we really have a repeat guest today, but the last time we talked to this guest, she had a different job. And she's got one that represents a number of people that are listening today. And we're talking to Lily Chi. And last time I talked to Lily, she was working for County Executive Ike Leggett for Montgomery County. And she's gone on to higher lands now. She's become Delegate Lily Chi, representing District 15 in Montgomery County. And we're glad to have you back, Lily. It's been about 3 or 4 years since we did the first BioTalk with you.
That's right. Well, thank you for having me back, Rich. It's always great to see you and talking about biotech.
Great. And I know that you're passionate about the topic of biohealth and life sciences in Montgomery County and in Maryland. So, but I think before we go into some of the things you're working on in the assembly now and what you're doing today, it would be very good for the listeners for you to introduce yourself to them, sort of your background, how you've evolved to where you are, and tell them a little bit about your history.
Well, again, thanks for having me, Rich. I am Delegate Lily Chi. I'm a first-term Maryland state legislator who started in 2019. I represent parts of Montgomery County, which is called Western Montgomery County, actually the largest district in Montgomery County, from Potomac all the way to Poolsville, adjacent to the Frederick County line. I grew up during a very tumultuous time in Shanghai, China. And when China decided to open its doors to the rest of the world, I chose to come to the United States to pursue better opportunities. And I moved across many different states to pursue degrees and jobs, for the most part, not knowing what to do with my life. And along the way, had to overcome tremendous language and cultural barriers, as you could imagine. And because of that, I have a diverse career background. I had many different jobs in many different fields. I started in higher education as a student affairs professional, working for different universities with the students. And then after I got my MBA from American University, I transitioned to working in economic development, first for the city of Washington, D.C., and then I had the opportunity to work in Montgomery County for former County Executive Ike Leggett. And that was when you and I met, Rich, and I had a great pleasure of working with you in establishing BioHealth Innovation. That was actually 10 years ago.
It's amazing we both survived for 10 years.
Right. And our vision at the time was to establish a regional innovation intermediary, a role that you have played very well. So thank you. And I went on to focus on economic growth and the workforce development issues in the Office of the County Executive. So before I ran for office, I helped establish another public-private partnership, which here we like to call P3, which is the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation, MCEDC, which is Montgomery County's premier economic development organization that replaced the former Department of Economic Development. So that's in a nutshell of my journey in this country. And then in 2018, I decided to run for office. And after an extraordinary campaign that got a tremendous amount of press, in fact, it was covered both in the Washington Post and NPR, I joined the Maryland legislature as the first Chinese immigrant state delegate.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's been a long road traveled and
long road, indeed.
Yeah, the long road. And I'm glad that we had a chance to meet 10 years ago, or else maybe
That's right.
BioHealth Innovation wouldn't be here today. So thank you for your support.
Great pleasure.
Yeah, really, one doesn't make the transition very easily from doing economic development and make a decision to go into public service. So what is it about public service that really motivates you to do what you're doing today?
There are several very compelling reasons, and it was not an easy decision. As you can imagine, for an immigrant like me, politics is not something we came to do. That was probably beyond my wildest dreams. But I'm so glad I landed where I am, because I believe for someone who grew up from a very different cultural and political background, and having lived through two different political systems, I have some unique perspectives about the role of government in the society. I grew up at a time in China when there was no private sector, no nonprofit sector. There was only government dominating everything and everyone's life and making decisions big and small. And I saw the colossal failure of such dominance and policy. And I wanted to make sure that as a policymaker, I have deep respect for other sectors and making sure that government plays our role as an enabler and a partner and not just a regulator as a force for good, because every sector needs to play its role for the greater good of the society. So I am glad I could provide such perspectives as a new American and an immigrant. And the other is because of representation issue. Even though now Montgomery County is 1/3 foreign born and Asian Americans make up 15% of the population, we are by and large not at the policymaking table. There's such gross underrepresentation of people like me and voices like mine. I just want to make sure that our policymaking takes into consideration of the thinking of new communities like me. I take this role very seriously. And finally, I just see such tremendous opportunities in growing our economy, making ourselves more successful and competitive, both regionally and globally. And with my background and experience, I felt like I could more directly influence change by being an elected official. And I'm glad I did.
Well, it's always good to have a fresh perspective in politics and in the assembly, and you definitely bring a fresh perspective, but one with a great deal of experience that you take into that assembly. So as a result of that experience, all of the delegates and members of the assembly get different assignments to work on. They might work on different committees or in different caucuses for the work that they do during the year. So could you tell our listeners a little bit about your committee assignments? How are they assigned, and sort of any other caucus involvement that you're involved with?
The committee assignments were both by personal interests and expertise and the needs in terms of balance, I'm sure. It was assigned by the Speaker's office, and the counterpart, the Senate, would be the Senate President's office based on your requests and personal interests and your community's balance and needs. I asked to serve on Economic Matters Committee. What a surprise, right? I'm very glad I got my wish where I could apply myself more directly and effectively. So I serve on the Business Regulations Subcommittee so that we could be very sensible in how we approach business concerns and consumer rights and protect public interests while growing our economy. And our committee has very broad purview from alcohol, tobacco issues to insurance issues to clean energy regulation. So I learned a great deal. I also chair the Montgomery County House Delegations Economic Development Committee. And to answer your question about the caucus, of course, I am part of the Women's Caucus. And by the way, Maryland now has the largest number of women legislators in our history.
Wow.
From both parties. And also I am part of the Asian American Legislative Caucus.
Super. Well, it sounds that you're serving in roles that you can personally engage in because you believe in them, really. So
right.
It's nice that the speaker was willing to recognize what your strengths would be and how you could contribute to your constituents as well as to us in the state. Now, when we look at your role in the county government that you had, how has that influenced what your focus areas in the assembly are? Because we worked on some issues related to SBIR funding and small business innovation research grant funding and how to help small businesses in the biohealth industry. And I know that you were very active there in Montgomery County. So how has that influenced some of your work that you're doing at the assembly?
Well, it has tremendous influence on my current focus. And I primarily focus on a couple of different areas. One is to make Maryland more competitive, to grow our economy and the industries of the future and the quality jobs. And the other is to make sure our government works better and is more relevant and culturally competent to our changing demographics and changing communities. Over the past 3 sessions, I have introduced 35 pieces of legislation and passed a dozen, which is quite productive. The pandemic nonetheless. And they are mostly reflective of these areas of interest. And to get back to your point about my past work in the county government, including what you and I worked in terms of innovation entrepreneurship, that continues to be a very strong focus of mine. For example, the first year I introduced the legislation and you came to testify to establish SBIR matching grant, remember? And the second year we succeeded. So we now have a legislation that has been passed. It's now in effect. TEDCO is managing this program. What it does is the state provides 25% matching grant to any companies in Maryland that have already qualified for federal SBIR, Small Business Innovation, and STTR grant from any of the 11 federal agencies, up to 25%. Each year, 20 companies in phase 1 and 10 companies in phase 2 can qualify for this grant. It's not first come, first served, because we want to pick more competitive applicants and make sure that it's more equitable for different kinds of companies in different industries. And it's not just focused on biohealth, but broadly tech. And I also introduced a compendium legislation to provide technical assistance, similar to what you did, Rich, in Montgomery County, to make sure we provide technical assistance to companies to more effectively go after both federal grants and the private capital. So that's another piece of legislation that has also passed. In fact, 2 pieces of legislation related to technical assistance. I also understand where the world is going and where our economy is going, where the good jobs are in the future. So I introduced a couple other pieces of legislation to grow our economy. One is to focus transitioning our manufacturing industries to make sure they adopt the latest technologies so that we capture all of these opportunities. And think about the tremendous R&D assets we have. Would it be great if we produce more of what we research here? The other is a piece of legislation to grow our clean energy economy, which could definitely use the model we have used to grow biohealth industries to also grow a new industry, which is advanced clean energy, by establishing a green bank, designating a green bank at the state level to better leverage private capital, and to establish an accelerator to help entrepreneurs advance and commercialize technologies in the area of clean energy. So I'm having a lot of fun with these innovation entrepreneurship kind of ideas. And my colleagues seem to be very supportive. That's why I got to pass these bills and would love to continue to partner with you and other partners. And I'm excited with what you are doing with Connected DMV, which is this global pandemic prevention and biodefense center that will land in Montgomery County. So I can't wait to see how we can work together on that.
Definitely. There's so many different things we can work on. And before, you and I probably wouldn't have talked about sustainable development or the environment because that wasn't a primary focus for biohealth. But Andy Eckert, our producer, and I just had a chance to do a BioTalk with someone from the UK embassy and someone from AstraZeneca. It's COP26, which is the 195 country meeting that they have every 5 years to develop policies around sustainable development. Is going to be in England in 2021 this year. So the relationship between the biohealth industry and environmental is that pharma represents or impacts our environment to about 4% of the total pollution that happens in the environment. And AstraZeneca now has taken the lead among biopharmaceutical companies to address aggressive policies to reduce carbon emissions in all of their sites around the world. So what you have is the convergence now, Lily.
Thank you. You said the word convergence.
Convergence.
That's a beautiful word. Absolutely. In fact, my bill on advanced clean energy innovation entrepreneurship was very strongly endorsed and supported by the Global Bio Organization. They came to testify and they were very excited about that. They said, could you actually expand the definition so that it would include biochemicals and all of that? I said, absolutely. I'm always open to new ideas. Yes.
Well, that's great because we're going to do another follow-up with them. And maybe it would be interesting to get someone from the local level interacting with someone at the global level and at the industry level. So stay tuned. We might reach back out to you on that one.
Let's do it.
Okay. So we talked about the bills you have been successful with. You've introduced 35. There's 12 passed. I'm sure that there are still some that are in the mix for future discussion. What are the things that are most active that you're currently working on today? And there's another thing where can listeners help support anything that you're doing that would have a benefit to them as well as our state?
There are several that I can share with you. One of the areas I am looking at is to remove barriers for doing business in the state of Maryland, whether they are tech businesses or any other businesses or service providers or whatever. Both Montgomery County and Maryland need to continue to improve our business climate to be more competitive, both regionally and globally. So one of the issues I'm looking into is the business filing fees. My past legislation that was passed would lead to new recommendations by the state estate department, which collects those fees, to look at how the neighboring jurisdictions' dynamics are and how Maryland can be more competitive. So based on their recommendations for new fee structures, we're looking to new pieces of legislation to make ourselves more competitive. So any small businesses, regardless of industries, I would love to listen to, hear their feedback and see how we can be more sensible. And the other is I plan to introduce legislation to add a few new positions for bilingual business navigators for small businesses, because with the growth of immigrant population and immigrant entrepreneurs, a lot of times they are not familiar with business resources or regulations, and they could really be tremendous engines of growth if we can enable them to do what they do the best. And language and culture is oftentimes a big barrier. I'm also looking at some market incentives to bring some fresh grocers to some underserved communities, including one I represent, like Postville, which is a very rural community, and some other urban areas that are also branded as food deserts. This is also a concern brought to my attention. Beyond that, I am personally deeply passionate about equity and access issues, especially related to voting. I want to make Maryland's election system more immigrant-friendly and independent voters friendly. Because right now, I realized representing a district with some fast-growing immigrant populations, a lot of my friends are not Democrats or Republicans. They're just registered voters who are independents. They want to vote, but our system does not make it easy for them to participate in elections that matter. And elections that matter in Maryland, especially in Montgomery County, where Democrats outnumber Republicans by like a 3-1 or something, the primary election is the election. And a lot of people either don't want to be a registered party member or don't know that there is such a thing as a primary election. So besides spending a lot of time educating my people, I really want to change and improve our system. In the past, I introduced the legislation to, one, make a circuit court judges' elections nonpartisan, just like a school board members, because judges shouldn't be politicians. And two, to make our close the primary system more friendly to independent voters who are largely immigrants, small businesses, young people, young families, and all of that. So if any of your listeners are interested and agree with me that voting rights are the fundamental rights of all other rights to start influencing policies, then let's work together to improve our system. Because if you don't have a say in the policies, the rest of it is moot point.
Very good. And as you know, I have to be independent in my views and the way I approach BioTalk here. But a lot of the personal issues that you have just discussed are also very prevalent at the national level, which we know. So I think that what you're doing here locally within Montgomery County and Maryland also could have potential ramifications on some of those things that are going to happen at the national level.
Absolutely. I should have mentioned, Rich, that I'm also working on something that I'm quite excited about, which is to expand the Asian American history curriculum in our public schools. It's now a national movement. There are legislators across other states, across the country in other states that I'm communicating with. So I'm quite excited about that as well.
Excellent. It really fits into your culture and something that if you don't have a leader to address that, basically it remains silent. Really.
That's right. And last year, the past pandemic year was extraordinarily difficult for Asian Americans, as you know.
Right. And I didn't really want to focus too much on the pandemic, but what's happened over the last 16 months with your role as a delegate and what has changed during COVID-19 and the pandemic for you?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. I never thought what an interesting time this would be when I joined the legislature. 2 out of the 3 sessions I had were during the pandemic. We managed to be productive nonetheless, but it was extraordinarily challenging. Several good things came out, but one good thing was we now realize how to better leverage technology to make democracy work better. For example, all of our hearings are now live streamed, including subcommittee meetings and all those discussions and debates that nobody paid attention in the past, and now they're so easily accessible. Remember the first year when you came to testify, you had to drive and wait 4 hours on a Friday afternoon. Now you can just Zoom in.
Yeah, right.
All these things are dramatic improvements to make our democracy work better and make policy making more accessible to our residents, which is a great thing. I think going forward, we probably will adopt a hybrid model of our policy debates and hearings, and the goal is to encourage participation.
That's great, Lily. I think inclusion and getting more people involved is important, and we're using technology to do that. Unfortunately, it resulted as a result of the pandemic, but I think all of that's for the better now. And I'm going to circle back a little bit about the biohealth industry real quickly before we get into some of your future goals. And when we first started 10 years ago, or even earlier, manufacturing wasn't as big an issue because most of our companies were doing research and didn't have commercialized products. If you really want to know where one of the major growth areas is in Maryland and in Montgomery County specifically now in the biopharma industry, it's in manufacturing facilities.
That's right.
Because companies have progressed to the stage now where they're commercializing technologies that need to be produced rather than just doing the research. So that's a very positive sign of the progress that our region is making because companies are becoming more mature and actually getting products into the marketplace, which I think is really an attribute.
It's music to my ears, Rich. I am
both of us
thrilled to hear that. Our industries are growing up. We can now produce what we research here. That's exactly what I want to do. So with my piece of legislation, I'm now assigned to work with the industry leaders in the manufacturing business, including biomanufacturing, to look at how Maryland can better capture such opportunities. And with NIST, which is a national leader on such industries, this is a tremendous opportunity. And I represent District 15, which is part of the Montgomery County and Maryland's BioHealth Court with IBBR, the University of Shady Grove, and the Shady Grove Life Sciences Park, the National Cybersecurity Center for Excellence, and all of these assets within practically walking distance, and the GSK and several other biopharma companies. I just would love to see us better leverage such centers of excellence and opportunities and really make sure our biomanufacturing take off. I'm so excited.
It's happening. The second thing you mentioned was the Global Pandemic Prevention and Biodefense, which originated with Connected DNV in Washington about 14 months ago or so. And we just had a steering committee meeting yesterday. One of the great things about it is both the state of Maryland and Montgomery County have helped finance the strategic planning for that center. That plan, the initial plan is going to be released, we think, in the next week or so. And one of the things that was determined already is that the global headquarters for the Pandemic Center is going to be in Montgomery County.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is fantastic. And it has an interim location, which is going to be U.S. Pharmacopoeia, right in Montgomery County, until they can find out what a future permanent site will be. But
I have a recommendation for you. We can talk offline.
We can talk offline. But one of the reasons for the center to be headquartered here is people remember the warp speed funding that BARDA gave out, which was $16 billion. 40% of that money came into Montgomery County, Maryland. And of course, you had the FDA and you had NIH, you had Emergent, AstraZeneca, GSK, Novavax, which is growing like a weed. So with the negative implications of COVID-19, it's had a positive awareness change for people around the world of how important our ecosystem in Montgomery County, Maryland is to the rest of the world, really.
Definitely. You hit the nail right on the head. We are the place to be.
We are the place to be. So let's talk a little bit about the future. I've been able to watch your career progress over the last 11 years. Let's talk a little bit about what are your personal goals for the future? What would you like to achieve personally, and where would you like to be 5-10 years from now?
Well, I personally hope to stay healthy and productive and happy.
That sounds like a politician's answer.
When I'm productive, I am happy. And with friends, I'm happy. Well, I think, of course, as you know, I just announced my re-election campaign. And as I mentioned, this pandemic made my first term was not only strange, but extraordinarily challenging. Some days I and they say, could we just erase that and say, we push the reset button and start? Can we say it didn't count? But actually, it should count because it was a great run. But yes, I want to continue to serve in this capacity because I have broad interests and I can offer a lot of perspectives and bring different voices to the table. And I'm really having a great ride. I am very grateful. As you probably know, the Maryland Tech Council recognized me as Legislator of the Year last year. And I also was recognized by the National Capital Region's Center for Nonprofit Advancement for Public Policy Leadership Award. So I want to continue to work with nonprofit partners and the private sectors to drive our innovation and drive our economic growth, which was the primary reason why I ran for office, to make changes. And the other is, no matter what I do, to answer your question, I see myself as a cultural broker. I'm a cultural broker between the new communities and the larger community. I'm a broker between the public and the private sectors. So whatever I can do in those regards, I'm very happy to participate.
Thank you. You didn't actually answer the question about what you'd like to be 10 years from now, but you told me.
No.
No, I know. It's hard.
Life changes too much.
Don't stop trying to achieve higher levels within the service area that you are now, because I think you have significant potential to serve even bigger constituents than what you are doing today.
I'm very happy where I am, but thank you.
Yeah. And congratulations on your recognition over this past year. It is well deserved. And before we close with Delegate Lily Chi, District 15, Montgomery County, Lily, do you have anything else you'd like to talk to the listeners about that we haven't covered now?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground. I just think this is an extraordinary time, and not many communities are as blessed as the National Capital Region, Montgomery County, and Maryland in terms of the tremendous assets we have. To me, it is both a moral obligation to the world to leverage our assets to make greater contributions in terms of advancing innovation and commercializing while creating jobs at the same time. But also, it really is our bright spot in terms of how we can take our game to the next level. So it's a win-win for everyone, and I want to be a partner in that journey.
Hear, hear. So thank you, Delegate Chi, for reappearing on BioTalk podcast. And I know this won't be the last time. You've got many future goals to work on and many bills that I think that will benefit your constituents in both Montgomery County and the state. And if there's anything we can do to help support you, now that I can testify virtually, it'll make it easier. So
that's right.
Just call upon us and the listeners. But if the listeners want to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
The best way is to send an email to my office. It's Lily, Lily, .chi, which is QI, at house.state.md.us.
And if you can't find that, just Google Lily Chi and you'll find her on the internet. And then it'll also have that same address.
Maryland General Assembly website. Yes.
Very good. Well, Lily, thanks again for us catching up with one another. We don't do it often enough. And let's stay in touch through the rest of this year. And hopefully you'll be able to tune in for some of our bio forum on September 13th and 14th. Going to get a chance to talk to Dr. Fauci and Senator Van Hollen, people who have significant influence over what we're doing in America right now.
I have signed up and look forward to it.
Thank you very much. See you soon, Lily.
Thank you, Rich.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.